Captain Zara Chun pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the mining station's corridor. The vibrations told her everything she needed to know. 3 heartbeats. 2 humans, 1 alien. The alien's heart beat faster than the others, driven by fear. She had been tracking the Kythera raiding party for 6 months across 3 star systems. They thought they were hunting easy prey on the Outer Rim colonies. They had no idea they were being hunted in return. The mining station on Kepler 442c had gone silent 2 days ago. Standard protocol would be to send a fleet, make noise, and hope to scare the raiders away. But Captain Chen wasn't standard protocol. She was something the galaxy had never seen before. She was human. The Galactic Council had spent 3,000 years building their perfect civilization. Every species had their role. The Altarians were diplomats with their silver tongues and peaceful nature. The Rigelians were engineers, their 6 arms perfect for complex construction. The Centaurians were traders, their mathematical minds calculating profit across star systems. And then there were the predator species, kept in check by careful treaties and economic pressure. The Kythera were one of these. Wolf-like creatures with razor claws and pack-hunting instincts. They raided outer colonies for slaves and resources, but never pushed too hard against the core worlds. The system worked. It had worked for millennia, until humanity applied to join the Galactic Council 18 months ago. The Council's first reaction had been confusion. Earth's location put it far from any major trade routes. The planet was a Class 12 death world, covered in dangerous weather, toxic plants, and aggressive wildlife. Most species couldn't even breathe the atmosphere without filters. The humans seemed friendly enough in their initial communications. They spoke of peace, trade, and mutual cooperation. Their technology was primitive, but showed potential. The Council voted to grant them provisional membership, expecting them to fill some minor role in the galactic economy. They were wrong. Captain Chen moved through the station like a shadow. Her boots made no sound on the metal floors. Her breathing was controlled, silent. The Kythera had excellent hearing, but she had trained in forests where a broken twig could mean death. The first raider never saw her coming. Chen's knife slid between his ribs before he could cry out. She lowered his body to the ground and continued forward. The other 2 Kythera were in the station's control room, arguing over the mining equipment they planned to steal. They spoke in their own language, but Chen's translator caught every word. The slaves we took from the outer farms will bring good price on Nexus Station, the larger Kythera growled. Yes, but these mining machines are worth more. We should take everything. The ship cannot carry both. Choose quickly before more human patrols arrive. Chen almost smiled at that. Human patrols. If only they knew. She had volunteered for this mission against direct orders from Earth Command. The official human policy was still diplomatic engagement. Build relationships. Show the galaxy that humans were peaceful, reasonable beings who just wanted to trade and learn. But Chen had read the intelligence reports. She knew about the raids, the stolen colonies, the families torn apart by Kythera slave ships. The Galactic Council's response was always the same. File protests. Call for negotiations. Ask nicely for the stolen people to be returned. It never worked. The Kythera had hit 17 human colonies in the past 6 months. They had taken over 200 people as slaves. The Council's response was to schedule a hearing for next year. Chen decided the galaxy needed to learn something new about humans. She moved to the control room door and listened. The 2 Kythera were still arguing. She counted their breathing patterns, mapped their positions by sound. The larger one stood near the main console. The smaller one paced by the far wall. Chen pulled 2 smoke grenades from her belt and set them for a 3-second delay. She tossed them into the room and followed immediately after. The Kythera's enhanced senses, so useful for hunting prey across open plains, became a weakness in the enclosed space. The smoke burned their sensitive noses and made their eyes water. They stumbled blindly, calling out in their pack language. Chen moved between them like death itself. Her knife found the smaller Kythera first, sliding between his shoulder blades to pierce his heart. The larger one heard his packmate fall and roared in rage, swinging his claws through the smoke. Chen ducked under the wild swing and drove her blade up into his throat. He dropped to his knees, then fell forward onto the metal floor. The smoke cleared slowly. Chin stood over the bodies and felt no satisfaction, only cold purpose. These three had been scouts. The main Kythera pack was still out there with their captured humans. She searched the control room and found what she needed. The Kythera had been sloppy, leaving their communication logs open on the main console. Chin plugged in her translator device and began reading. The main pack had taken their prisoners to an asteroid base in the Vega system. 47 humans were being held there, waiting for transport to the slave markets. The Kythera leader, a massive warrior named Throat Ripper, was planning to sell them within the week. Chin smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a pleasant expression. She activated her ship's communication array and sent a coded message back to Earth. The message was simple: package located. Proceeding with delivery. 3 hours later, Chin's ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system. The asteroid base showed up on her sensors immediately. It was heavily fortified, with energy shields and weapon platforms scattered across the rocky surface. Any reasonable species would call for backup. They would bring a fleet, negotiate from a position of strength, maybe trade something valuable for the prisoner's release. But humans weren't reasonable. They were something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were apex predators from a death world who had learned to work together instead of destroying each other. Chin studied the base's defenses through her ship's sensors. 12 weapon platforms. 43 life signs inside the main complex. Energy readings suggested a small fighter squadron in the hangar base. She had faced worse odds on Earth during the resource wars. At least here, she knew exactly who the enemy was. Chin powered down her ship's engines and activated the stealth systems. Human technology might be primitive by galactic standards, but it had been designed by creatures who understood the art of hunting. Her ship became almost invisible to sensors, a ghost drifting through space. She landed on the asteroid's dark side, far from the base's main sensors. The surface gravity was low, which would help her move quickly. The atmosphere was toxic, but her suit's filters could handle it for hours. Chun gathered her equipment and checked her weapons one final time. Knife, sidearm, rifle, explosives, medical supplies. Everything she needed to remind the galaxy that humans were not prey. She sealed her helmet and stepped out onto the asteroid's surface. Above her, the stars shone with cold light. Somewhere among them, the Galactic Council was probably holding another committee meeting about the Kythera problem. Chin began walking toward the base. She had a different kind of solution in mind. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not spent 10,000 years clawing their way to the top of Earth's food chain just to become victims among the stars. The first lesson would be taught here, in blood and fire, 47 light years from home. The outer perimeter sensors never detected her approach. Chin moved like her ancestors had moved through ancient forests, reading the ground with every step. The Kythera had built their base using standard galactic engineering principles. Efficient, logical, and completely unprepared for an enemy who understood that sometimes the best technology was a sharp knife and the will to use it. She reached the base's outer wall just as Vega's primary star began to set behind the asteroid's horizon. The gathering darkness would help hide her approach, but it also meant the Kythera guards would be more alert. Chin smiled again. Let them be alert. She had spent her childhood hunting creatures that could smell fear from a mile away and hear a heartbeat through solid rock. The Kythera were about to learn what it meant to be hunted by something even more dangerous than themselves. Something human. The first guard post fell in complete silence. Chin watched from behind a cluster of mining equipment as the Kythera sentry made his patrol round. He moved with the casual confidence of a predator who had never been prey. His ears swiveled constantly, listening for threats, but he expected those threats to come from ships or other Kythera packs. He never looked down. Chin had spent 2 hours crawling through the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the base's outer ring. The Kythera had built their fortress thinking like ground-based pack hunters. They watched the horizons and the sky, but they forgot about the spaces underneath their feet. Humans had learned long ago that sometimes the best path was the one nobody else would take. Chin emerged from a ventilation grate directly below the guard tower. The Kythera sentry stood 12 feet above her, his back turned as he scanned the asteroid's rocky surface. His rifle hung loosely from a shoulder strap. Chin moved up the tower's support struts like a spider. Her gloves had been designed for zero-gravity work, with tiny grips that could find purchase on any surface. She reached the platform level in seconds. The guard died without making a sound. Chin's knife pierced his brainstem at the base of his skull, severing all motor function instantly. She caught his body as it fell and lowered it gently to the platform floor. 1 down, 42 to go. Chin took the guard's position and studied the base through his scope. The main complex was built into the asteroid's largest crater, with 3 levels visible above ground, and who knew how many below. Lights moved behind armored windows as the Kythera went about their business. They had no idea death was already inside their defenses. Chin's earpiece crackled with static, then cleared to reveal human voices. The prisoners were being held in the lower levels, and some of them still had their communication devices. They spoke in whispers, sharing information about guard rotations and cell locations. "Sarah's hurt bad," one voice said. "They broke her leg when she tried to run." "Keep her quiet," another replied. The big one with the scars said he'd kill anyone who causes trouble. "How long before they move us?" 2 days, maybe 3. I heard them talking about a buyer on Proxima Station. Chin's grip tightened on her rifle. Proxima Station was deep in Kythera space, far beyond any hope of rescue by conventional means. Once the prisoners were moved there, they would disappear into the galaxy's black market and never be seen again. But the Kythera had made one critical mistake. They assumed that humans were like every other species in the galaxy. They thought in terms of governments and fleets and official responses. They didn't understand that sometimes all it took was one human who refused to let injustice stand. Chin moved to the guard tower's communication console and began her real work. The Kythera's security system was good, but it was designed to keep out other Kythera or similar species. It wasn't prepared for an enemy who thought in 3 dimensions and understood that every system had weaknesses. Chin had been a systems analyst before the war on Earth. She understood networks, data flows, and the tiny gaps that existed in every security protocol. The Kythera system had been built for efficiency, not paranoia. Within an hour, she had complete access to their internal communications, security cameras, and environmental controls. The base's layout appeared on her display screen. 3 levels above ground, 5 levels below. The prisoners were held in level -3, behind force fields and armed guards. The Kythera leader, Throat Ripper, had his command center on the top level, surrounded by his pack's elite warriors. Chin studied the guard rotations and mapped patrol patterns. The Kythera were disciplined, but they followed predictable schedules. They changed shifts every 6 hours, with overlap periods where guards would gather to share information. Those overlap periods were when they would be most vulnerable. Chin waited until the next shift change began. She watched through the security cameras as guards moved through the corridors, heading to their assigned positions. In the confusion of movement, no one would notice one extra figure in the shadows. She slipped down from the guard tower and made her way to the main complex. The service entrance was protected by a simple electronic lock. Chin's tools made quick work of it. The corridors inside were wider than human ships, built for creatures who preferred to move in packs. The walls were rough stone, carved directly from the asteroid's interior. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that provided perfect cover for someone who knew how to use them. Chin moved toward the lower levels, following the building's blueprints in her mind. She passed 3 guard stations without being detected, each time using ventilation shafts or maintenance corridors to avoid direct contact. The Kythera were excellent hunters, but they had been bred for open spaces and pack tactics. They thought in terms of overwhelming force and direct confrontation. They couldn't understand an enemy who attacked from the shadows and disappeared like smoke. Level -3 was different from the upper floors. Here, the corridors were narrow and heavily monitored. Camera sensors tracked every movement. Force field generators hummed with deadly energy. Chin studied the prison level through a maintenance hatch for 20 minutes before making her move. The guard station was positioned to overlook the main corridor, with clear lines of sight to all the cell blocks. 2 Kythera warriors sat behind armored glass, watching security monitors and checking prisoner status reports. But They weren't watching the air circulation system. Chen crawled through the ventilation shaft above the guard station. The metal was old and made small noises as she moved, but the background hum of machinery covered any sound. She positioned herself directly over the guards and prepared her equipment. The gas grenade was a special design, created by human military engineers for use against alien physiology. It would render the Kythera unconscious within seconds, without causing permanent harm. Chen wasn't interested in meaningless killing. She just needed them out of the way. She dropped the grenade through a ventilation grate and sealed the shaft immediately. The guards had 3 seconds to react before the gas filled their station. They managed to trigger an alarm before collapsing. The alarm brought 4 more guards running from other sections. Chen was ready for them. She dropped from the ceiling into the corridor, landing behind the first group of reinforcements. Her rifle spoke 4 times in quick succession, each shot placed with surgical precision. The Kythera warriors fell with holes in their heads before they could return fire. The alarm continued to wail throughout the lower level. Chen ignored it and moved to the guard station controls. The force field generators required biometric authorization from Kythera personnel. Chen dragged one of the unconscious guards to the scanner and pressed his palm against the reader. The force fields deactivated with a soft chime. "Everyone out," Chen called in English. "Stay close to me and move quickly." The human prisoners emerged from their cells with expressions of disbelief and hope. 47 people, ranging in age from 16 to 65. Most showed signs of rough treatment, but they were alive and mobile. A woman with gray hair and determined eyes stepped forward. "Who are you?" "Captain Zara Chun, Earth Defense Force. We're going home." "How many ships do you have?" asked a man with a bandaged arm. "Just me." The prisoners stared at her for a moment. Then, the gray-haired woman smiled grimly. "What do you need us to do?" Chun felt a surge of pride. These people had been through hell, but they were ready to fight. That was humanity's real strength. Not their technology or their numbers, but their refusal to give up. "Follow me to the hangar bay. Stay quiet, stay together, and don't stop for anything." Chun led the group through the lower-level corridors, using service passages and maintenance routes to avoid the main areas. The base's alarm system continued to sound, but most of the Kythera response was focused on the upper levels. They reached the hangar bay without major incident. 3 Kythera fighters sat in launch cradles, along with the ship that had brought the prisoners to this place. Chen's own vessel was hidden outside, but it couldn't carry everyone. "Can anyone fly one of these?" Chen asked, gesturing at the alien ships. A young woman raised her hand. "I'm a pilot. Military transport before this." "Good. Take the largest ship and get everyone off this rock. Head for the outer system and wait for my signal." "What about you?" Chen checked her weapons and smiled. "I still have work to finish." The prisoners loaded into the stolen Kythera transport while Chun prepared for the next phase of her mission. She had rescued the humans, but the real message hadn't been delivered yet. The galaxy needed to understand that attacking humans would have consequences. Throat Ripper and his pack were about to learn that lesson personally. Chun watched the transport launch safely from the hangar bay, then made her way toward the upper levels. The base was in full alert now, with armed patrols moving through every corridor. But Chun had advantages they couldn't counter. She knew where they were going before they got there. She could hear them coming from 3 corridors away. And, most importantly, she understood something about combat that the Kythera had forgotten in their centuries of easy raids against helpless colonies. Sometimes, the hunter becomes the hunted. Throat Ripper stood 8 feet tall and weighed 400 pounds of muscle, bone, and fury. His claws had torn through the armor of 100 enemies. His pack had raided across 50 star systems without ever meeting serious resistance. He stared at the empty prison cells through his command center's monitors and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. "How many humans are on this base?" he growled at his lieutenant. "The scans show only 1 heat signature moving through the upper levels, pack leader." "But our losses." The lieutenant's voice trailed off. 17 Kythera warriors were dead. 17 of his best hunters, killed by a single human who moved through their fortress like a ghost. The security cameras caught glimpses of movement in the shadows, but never a clear shot of the enemy. "Impossible," Throat Ripper snarled. Humans are prey animals. They hide behind their technology and their committees. They do not hunt. But the evidence was all around him. His pack's radio chatter had gone from confident reports to panicked warnings. Guards were abandoning their posts rather than face whatever was moving through the darkness. Throat Ripper had seen the files on human military capabilities. Their ships were inferior. Their weapons were primitive. Their society was built around negotiation and compromise, like every other prey species in the galaxy. The files were wrong. Captain Chen moved through the base's upper levels like a predator in her natural element. She had turned off the main lighting systems and activated the emergency power only, plunging most of the corridors into near darkness. Her night vision equipment gave her a massive advantage over enemies who relied on their natural senses. The Kythera were pack hunters, bred for cooperation and overwhelming force. But they had spent too many generations raiding helpless colonies. They had forgotten how to fight an enemy who refused to be intimidated. Chen found the next group of guards clustered around a security checkpoint, their energy rifles trained on empty corridors. They whispered to each other in their pack language, calling out locations where they had heard sounds or seen movement. They never looked up. Chen dropped from an overhead vent directly into the middle of their formation. Her knife took the first guard before he could raise his weapon. Her sidearm put 2 rounds into the second guard's chest. The third guard managed to fire 1 wild shot before Chen's blade found his throat. The energy bolt scorched the wall where Chen had been standing a split second before. She was already moving, disappearing back into the ventilation system before reinforcements could arrive. But this time, she left something behind. The explosive device was small, designed for sabotage rather than killing. It would detonate in exactly 3 minutes, taking out the main power junction for this section of the base. Chen wanted Throat Ripper to understand that she wasn't just killing his warriors. She was dismantling his entire operation piece by piece. The explosion echoed through the asteroid's corridors as the lights went out on level 2. Emergency power kicked in, but only at 20% capacity. The Kythera's high-tech security systems began failing one by one. Throat Ripper's communications array went offline. His long-range sensors stopped working. Even the basic life support systems began showing error messages. "She's taking apart our infrastructure," his lieutenant reported. "If this continues, we'll lose all operational capability within hours." "Then, we end this now," Throat Ripper replied. "Gather the remaining pack. We hunt this human directly." The Kythera leader armed himself with his personal weapons. A plasma rifle that could punch through starship armor. Claws enhanced with monomolecular edges. Bone plates sewn into his hide that could stop most small arms fire. He had killed over 300 sentient beings in his lifetime. He had led raids against defended positions and come away victorious. He was a warrior born and bred for combat. But as he moved through his own base's corridors, Throat Ripper felt the unfamiliar sensation of being hunted. Chen watched the Kythera leader through a security camera feed she had rerouted to her portable display. Throat Ripper moved with his remaining pack members, 12 warriors who stayed in tight formation and checked every shadow. They were good, professional, but they were thinking like Kythera, not like humans. Chen had spent the last hour placing explosive charges throughout the base's structural supports. Not enough to destroy the asteroid, but enough to collapse specific sections on command. She had turned Throat Ripper's fortress into a trap. The Kythera pack reached the central command level and spread out to search the area. They moved with military precision, covering each other's advances and maintaining communication discipline. Chen triggered the first set of charges. The explosion brought down a section of ceiling directly behind the pack, cutting off their retreat route. Rock and metal debris filled the corridor, creating a cloud of dust that blocked visibility and clogged sensitive Kythera nostrils. In the confusion, Chen struck. She dropped from above into the middle of the pack, her rifle firing in rapid bursts. 3 Kythera fell before they could react. The others scattered, seeking cover behind equipment and structural supports. But Chen was already moving. She rolled behind a control console as plasma bolts scorched the air where she had been standing. The Kythera's return fire was wild, desperate, lacking the coordination they had shown moments before. "There," one of them called out. Behind the main terminal, energy bolts pounded Chen's position, melting metal and starting small fires. But she was no longer there. She had used the distraction to move to a new position, circling around behind the Kythera formation. Her knife found the next victim. The blade slipped between armor plates to pierce vital organs. The Kythera warrior dropped without a sound. 8 left, plus Throat Ripper. The Kythera leader roared orders at his remaining pack. They were experienced fighters, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Chen fought without honor, without rules, without the formal challenges that governed civilized warfare. She fought like a human. 2 more Kythera fell to carefully placed rifle shots. Chen used the base's damaged infrastructure to her advantage, shooting through weakened walls and collapsed doorways. She forced the pack to split up, dividing their attention and their firepower. Throat Ripper finally understood what he was facing. This human wasn't just a soldier. She was an apex predator from a world that had forged warriors in fire and blood for millions of years. Fall back to the command center, he ordered. Defensive positions. But it was too late for defensive thinking. Chen had already taken control of the battle's tempo and location. She herded the remaining Kythera toward the command center like a sheepdog driving wolves. The command center was exactly where she wanted them. Chen had placed her largest explosive charges directly beneath the room's main support beams. Not enough to kill everyone inside, but enough to bring down the ceiling and trap them in the rubble. She waited until all the surviving Kythera were inside the room, then triggered the charges from her remote detonator. The explosion shook the entire asteroid. Dust and debris filled the air. Emergency lighting flickered and died. When the dust settled, Chen stood in the doorway of the ruined command center. 5 Kythera lay motionless under fallen beams and chunks of ceiling. 3 others were trapped, but alive, including Throat Ripper himself. The pack leader's legs were pinned beneath a massive piece of structural metal. His plasma rifle lay crushed nearby, but his claws were still functional, and his eyes burned with rage and defiance. "You fight without honor, human," he snarled. "No civilized species makes war like this." Chen stepped into the rubble-filled room and looked down at him. "You're right. We don't fight like civilized species." She pulled out her sidearm and checked the charge level. "We fight like humans. Your Galactic Council will never accept this kind of warfare. They will condemn your species for these methods." Chen smiled coldly. "The Galactic Council has had 3,000 years to stop raiders like you. They've tried negotiations, economic sanctions, and stern letters. How did that work out for the 47 humans you kidnapped?" Throat Ripper's ears flattened against his skull. "We took slaves. That is our right as conquerors. And I took them back. That is my right as a human." Chen aimed her weapon at the Kythera leader's head. "Here's the message you're going to deliver to your people. Humans are not prey. We are not victims. And we are not going to hide behind committees while our people suffer. You cannot change the galaxy with terror tactics." "I'm not trying to change the galaxy," Chen replied. "I'm teaching it to leave us alone." She pulled the trigger. The command center fell silent except for the hum of failing life support systems. Chen gathered her equipment and made her way back to the hangar bay. Her ship was waiting outside, along with the rescued prisoners who were safely clear of the asteroid. Before she left, Chen activated the base's communication array one final time. She sent a simple message to every Kythera ship within 50 light years. The message contained footage from the base's security cameras, showing the destruction of Throat Ripper's pack. It included detailed information about human military capabilities that the Galactic Council had never seen. Most importantly, it carried a promise written in simple, clear language that every species in the galaxy could understand. "Touch our people again, and we will come for you. We will find you wherever you hide. And we will remind you that humans are the monsters your nightmares forgot to include." Chen's ship departed the asteroid and jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a tomb that had once been a fortress. The message spread through Kythera space within hours, then beyond to other predator species who had considered humans potential prey. The galaxy had been introduced to a new concept. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hunters were about to become the hunted. Ambassador Kellyan of the Galactic Council stared at the holographic display in her private chambers, watching the footage from the Kythera asteroid base for the 15th time. The images never became easier to process. A single human had infiltrated a heavily fortified position and eliminated an entire pack of Kythera warriors. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through tactics that no civilized species had ever employed. The human moved through the base like a force of nature, striking from shadows and disappearing before retaliation was possible. She used the facility's own infrastructure against its defenders, turning their fortress into a trap. Most disturbing of all, she had done it alone. Kellyan's species, the Altarians, had built their civilization on the principle that conflict could always be resolved through negotiation. They had mediated disputes across the galaxy for over 2 millennia, finding peaceful solutions to seemingly impossible problems. But this human captain had chosen a different path entirely. She had solved the Kythera problem through methods that made Kellyan's diplomatic training feel naive and inadequate. The door chime interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Director Voss of the Galactic Security Council stepped into the chamber. His Rigelian features were tense with worry, all 6 of his arms moving in the agitation patterns that indicated extreme stress. "The situation is escalating beyond our control," he announced without preamble. 3 more Kythera raiding fleets have been destroyed in the past week. Kellyan turned off the holographic display. "The same human operative?" "We believe so. The tactics are identical in each case. Single infiltrator, precision strikes, complete elimination of enemy forces." Voss gestured with his upper arms. "But that's not the worst part. What else?" "The humans are not acting through their official government channels. Earth Command claims they have no knowledge of these operations. They insist Captain Chun is operating without authorization." Kellyan felt a chill run through her diplomatic corps. A rogue agent? Possibly. Or they're lying to maintain plausible deniability while their operative conducts a terror campaign against Kythera space. The implications were staggering. If humans were capable of this level of deception and violence, then everything the Council believed about their peaceful intentions was wrong. They might be facing a species that combined technological advancement with predatory instincts that had never been properly domesticated. What do the other Council members think? Voss's arms moved in complex patterns of frustration. The Centaurians want to impose immediate economic sanctions on Earth. The Draconians are calling for military intervention. The Aquarians think we should formally censure the humans and demand Captain Chun be turned over for trial. And the Kythera? That's the real problem. Their leadership is demanding the right to retaliate against human colonies. They claim their raids were legitimate acts of war under ancient treaty provisions. Kellyan had read those treaties. They were relics from the galaxy's darker past, when stronger species were permitted to raid weaker ones under certain circumstances. The Council had been slowly working to eliminate such agreements, but the process took decades of careful negotiation. How bad could Kythera retaliation be? Bad enough to trigger a full-scale war. They have over 300 ships, including 12 heavy cruisers. If they decide to make an example of human space, the sentence didn't need to be finished. Human colonial defenses were still primitive by galactic standards. A determined Kythera assault could devastate multiple worlds before any Council intervention could be organized. "We need to arrange a meeting with Earth Command immediately," Kellyan decided. This situation must be resolved through proper diplomatic channels before it spirals out of control. But even as she spoke, Kellyan wondered if diplomacy would be enough. The footage from the asteroid base suggested that humans might not think in the same terms as other galactic species. They might be something entirely different. 3 days later, the human delegation arrived at Council Station Alpha for emergency talks. Ambassador Sarah Martinez led the human team, accompanied by military advisors and diplomatic staff. Kellyan studied the humans carefully as they entered the main conference chamber. They moved with confidence despite being vastly outnumbered by the assembled Council representatives. Their body language showed no signs of intimidation or deference. Martinez herself was particularly interesting. She was smaller than the average human, with gray hair and kind eyes, but she carried herself like someone accustomed to being taken seriously. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured. "Distinguished colleagues," Martinez began, "Earth appreciates this opportunity to address the Council's concerns about recent events in Kythera space." Director Voss leaned forward. Ambassador Martinez, we need clear answers about Captain Zara Chen's activities. Is she acting under orders from your government? Captain Chun is currently listed as absent without leave from her duties with Earth Defense Force. Her actions do not represent official human policy. But you're not taking steps to stop her, observed Counselor Thex of the Draconian Empire. His reptilian features showed barely controlled aggression. Your military has made no effort to apprehend this rogue operative. Martinez's expression remained neutral. Captain Chun is operating in deep space, far from our patrol routes. We have limited resources to pursue individual personnel across multiple star systems. Kellyanne felt the subtle diplomatic maneuvering in those words. The humans were technically telling the truth while avoiding any commitment to actually stop their operative. The Kythera leadership is demanding satisfaction, Director Voss continued. They want Captain Chun turned over for trial under their justice system. That's impossible, Martinez replied immediately. Earth does not extradite its citizens to foreign powers for actions taken in defense of human lives. Defense. Counselor Thex's voice rose. She executed prisoners. She destroyed civilian infrastructure. These are war crimes by any galactic standard. Martinez's demeanor shifted slightly. The diplomatic mask slipped just enough to reveal something harder underneath. Counselor Thex, the Kythera were not civilians. They were armed raiders who had kidnapped 47 human citizens with the intent to sell them as slaves. Captain Chin's actions were a rescue operation, not an act of aggression. The methods she employed were effective, Martinez interrupted. For 3,000 years, this council has tried to resolve the Kythera problem through negotiations. How many innocent beings have been enslaved while you debated proper procedure? The chamber fell silent. It was a question that struck at the heart of the council's deepest failure. Everyone present knew that the diplomatic process had been inadequate to stop raiders and slavers, but no one had been willing to acknowledge it publicly. Kellyanne cleared her throat. Ambassador Martinez, the council recognizes that the Kythera situation has been challenging, but unilateral military action threatens the entire structure of galactic law. Does it? Martinez asked. Or does it simply demonstrate that some problems require direct action rather than endless committee hearings? Before anyone could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber with an urgent communication pad. Director Voss read the message quickly, his expression growing increasingly alarmed. What is it? Kellyanne asked. Long-range sensors have detected a massive Kythera fleet moving toward human space. Over 200 ships, including their entire heavy cruiser squadron. The chamber erupted in worried conversations as representatives contacted their home governments. This was exactly the escalation everyone had feared. Ambassador Martinez remained calm. How long until they reach human territory? 6 days, Director Voss replied. We need to organize a council intervention fleet immediately. That will take weeks, pointed out Counselor Thex. The bureaucratic process alone will be too slow, Martinez finished. As usual, Kellyanne felt the weight of galactic civilization resting on her shoulders. If the Kythera fleet attacked human colonies before the council could respond, it would prove that their entire system was a failure. Ambassador, Earth must recall Captain Chun immediately. If she continues these operations while the Kythera fleet approaches, it will only inflame the situation further. Martinez stood slowly. Counselor Kellyanne, I appreciate your concern, but you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. What do you mean? You assume that Captain Chun is the problem, that if we stop her, the Kythera will return to their previous behavior, and everything will go back to normal. Martinez looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council representative. But Captain Chun isn't the problem. She's the solution. I don't understand, Kellyanne admitted. The Kythera have been raiding peaceful colonies for centuries because they never faced meaningful consequences. They knew the council would file protests and call for negotiations, but nothing more. Martinez smiled, and for the first time, Kellyanne saw something predatory in the expression. Captain Chun taught them that actions have consequences. Now they're coming to attack human space because they're angry and frightened. How is that an improvement? Because now we know exactly where they are and what they're planning. They're no longer scattered raiders hitting targets of opportunity. They're a concentrated fleet moving toward a prepared defense. The implications hit Kellyanne like a physical blow. You wanted this to happen. We needed it to happen, Martinez corrected. The galaxy has been dealing with the Kythera problem by avoiding it. That approach has failed for 3,000 years. It was time to try something different. Director Voss leaned back in his chair. What are you planning? Justice, Martinez replied simply. The kind the Council has been unwilling to provide. As the human delegation left the chamber, Kellyanne realized that everything had changed. The galaxy had been operating under the assumption that all civilized species thought alike, valued the same things, and could be managed through the same diplomatic processes. But humans were different. They were predators who had learned cooperation, not prey animals who had developed technology. And they were about to remind the galaxy what that difference meant. In 6 days, the Kythera fleet would arrive at human space, expecting to find helpless colonies defended by primitive technology. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when you threaten the children of a death world. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched 200 Kythera warships drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The enemy fleet was massive, bristling with weapons that could glass entire continents. It was exactly what he had been hoping for. Sir, reported Commander Hayes from the sensor station, the Kythera fleet is holding position at the Heliopause. No immediate movement toward the inner planets. They're probably expecting us to panic, Stone replied calmly. How long before their scouts reach optimal scanning range? 12 hours, assuming they follow standard reconnaissance protocols. Stone nodded. 12 hours was more than enough time for the final preparations. The Kythera had no idea what they were flying into. The human fleet that faced them consisted of only 37 ships. On paper, it was a hopeless mismatch. The Kythera possessed overwhelming superiority in both numbers and firepower. But numbers weren't everything. Captain Chin's message had reached Earth 3 weeks ago, along with her detailed intelligence on Kythera ship designs, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines. Earth Command had used that time very carefully. Signal from Fleet Command, reported the communications officer. Operation Deathworld is authorized. All ships are weapons-free. Stone allowed himself a small smile. Acknowledge. Transmit activation codes to all deployed units. Throughout the Sol system, devices that had been quietly positioned over the past month began powering up. Some were hidden in asteroid fields. Others drifted in the cold vacuum between planetary orbits. A few had been placed inside seemingly abandoned space stations. The Kythera were about to learn that humans had been preparing for this moment since Captain Chen sent her first report. Warlord Fong Render commanded the Kythera fleet from his flagship, the Blood Tide. His pack had been selected for this mission because of their experience with void warfare and their absolute loyalty to the pack hierarchy. The humans had humiliated his people. They had killed Throat Ripper and destroyed several raiding fleets through cowardly ambush tactics. It was time to restore Kythera honor through overwhelming force. Report from the Scout Squadron, announced his tactical officer. The human fleet is smaller than expected. 37 ships total, concentrated around their 4th planet. Fong Render's lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth. They're protecting their homeworld. Good. We will destroy their fleet in front of their own skies. Then, take slaves from the surface. The bridge crew growled their approval. This would be a traditional Kythera victory, won through superior numbers and aggressive tactics. Begin the advance, Fong Render ordered. All ships, attack formation. Target the largest human vessels first. The Kythera fleet began moving toward the inner system. Their formation was textbook perfect, with heavy cruisers in the center and lighter ships providing escort coverage. They never noticed the first wave of missiles until it was too late. The weapons had been launched from concealed platforms scattered throughout the outer system. They were small, stealthy, and designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Kythera ship defenses that Captain Chun had identified. Each missile carried a payload of metallic hydrogen, compressed to incredible density, and contained in a magnetic field generator. When the fields collapsed on impact, the hydrogen expanded explosively, creating temperatures that could melt battleship armor. 12 Kythera ships vanished in brilliant flashes of light. The survivors scattered in panic, their formation breaking apart as commanders tried to identify the source of the attack. Where did those missiles come from? Fong Render roared. Unknown, pack leader. Our sensors show no launch signatures. The second wave arrived 30 seconds later. This time, the missiles came from a different vector, striking the Kythera fleet's exposed flanks. 8 more ships died, their hulls cracked open like eggs. Fong Render finally understood that he was not attacking a primitive colony. He was walking into a carefully prepared ambush. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Activate point defense systems. But the human attack had only just begun. Admiral Stone watched the Kythera fleet's confusion with professional satisfaction. The missile strikes had been perfectly timed, hitting the enemy formation at its most vulnerable moment. Phase 2, he ordered. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, human stealth ships dropped their cloaking fields and launched their own attack runs. These vessels were smaller and faster than traditional warships, designed for hit-and-run tactics against larger opponents. Captain Chun had provided detailed intelligence on Kythera command structures and communication protocols. The stealth ships targeted the fleet's command vessels specifically, using precision strikes to disrupt coordination between different pack groups. Without centralized command, the Kythera formation began to collapse into smaller, independent units that fought without coordination. Sir, reported Commander Hayes, the enemy fleet is breaking apart. Multiple pack leaders are issuing contradictory orders. Perfect. Signal the main fleet to begin our advance. The 37 ships of the human battle line moved forward in perfect formation. They were outnumbered 5-1, but they had advantages the Kythera couldn't counter. Human ships had been designed by creatures who understood that space warfare was three-dimensional chess played at relativistic speeds. Every vessel carried redundant systems, adaptive tactics algorithms, and weapons that could be reconfigured in real time. Most importantly, they were crewed by humans who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to cooperate against superior enemies. The Kythera had size and numbers. The humans had something more dangerous: intelligence and the will to use it. Fong Render rallied what remained of his fleet around the blood tide. Half of his ships were gone, destroyed by weapons he had never encountered before. But he still had over 100 vessels, enough to overwhelm the approaching human force. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead human vessel. Show them the price of defying the pack. Energy beams and missile salvos converged on Admiral Stone's flagship. For a moment, it seemed like the Defiance would be destroyed by the sheer volume of incoming fire. But the human ship's defensive systems had been designed with this exact scenario in mind. Point defense lasers intercepted most of the missiles, while adaptive armor plating absorbed and redistributed the energy weapon impacts. The Defiance emerged from the barrage damaged but functional, its weapons already returning fire. The human response was surgical in its precision. Instead of trying to match the Kythera's overwhelming firepower, each human ship targeted specific systems on enemy vessels. Engine blocks, weapon mounts, command centers, and life support systems. The Kythera found themselves fighting opponents who aimed to disable rather than destroy, making their ships floating hulks instead of expanding clouds of debris. Why don't they finish us? Fong Render demanded as his tactical display showed more and more Kythera vessels going offline. His question was answered when the human admiral opened a communication channel to all surviving Kythera ships. The transmission was broadcast on standard frequencies, ensuring every warrior in the fleet could hear it. Kythera vessels, Admiral Stone's voice was calm and professional. You are defeated. Your fleet is broken. Your ships are disabled. But you are still alive. Fong Render snarled at his communication console. Human, you have won this battle through trickery and ambush. But you cannot hold us all prisoner. We will fight to the death before accepting surrender. I'm not asking for your surrender, Stone replied. I'm giving you a choice. The Admiral's image appeared on every Kythera ship's main display. He was an older human with gray hair and steady eyes, wearing a simple military uniform without ornamental decorations. You came here to teach humanity a lesson about the consequences of defying Kythera power, Stone continued. Instead, you've learned a lesson about the consequences of threatening human civilians. What do you want, human? I want you to go home. Tell your people what happened here. Explain that humanity is not prey, and we are not victims. We are something your species has never encountered before. Fongrender's confusion was complete. You're releasing us? With conditions, Stone clarified. First, all Kythera raiding activities in human space will cease immediately. Second, any humans currently held as slaves in Kythera territory will be returned unharmed. Third, reparations will be paid to the families of all Kythera victims. And if we refuse? Stone's expression didn't change. Then, Captain Shun will visit every Kythera world personally, and she won't be as merciful as I am. The threat hung in space between the two fleets. Every Kythera warrior had heard the stories of what had happened to Throwtripper's pack. They knew the human captain was capable of turning their own strongholds into tombs. Fongrender looked around his damaged bridge at his surviving pack members. They had come here as conquerors and found themselves completely outmatched by an enemy they had underestimated. Your terms are acceptable, he admitted reluctantly. Good. Your ships will be provided with basic repair supplies and escorted to the system boundary. Safe travels, Warlord. As the human fleet began organizing the withdrawal of defeated Kythera forces, Admiral Stone reflected on what had just taken place. This battle would be remembered throughout galactic history as the moment when humanity announced its presence as a major power. But, more than that, it demonstrated a uniquely human approach to warfare. They had not sought to exterminate their enemies or conquer their territory. They had applied precisely enough force to achieve their objectives, then offered their defeated opponents a path to redemption. It was a concept that most galactic species would find difficult to understand. The strong were supposed to dominate the weak, not offer them chances for rehabilitation. But humans had learned long ago that true strength came from knowing when not to use overwhelming force. They had defeated the Kythera not through superior technology or numbers, but through superior strategy and the wisdom to know when victory was complete. 3 days later, Ambassador Martinez stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council and delivered humanity's formal statement on the Sol System incident. Distinguished colleagues, she began, Earth regrets that military action was necessary to resolve the Kythera crisis. However, we believe the results speak for themselves. The holographic display showed the current status of Kythera space. Raiding activities had ceased completely. Slave markets were being dismantled. Reparation payments were being processed through council oversight committees. In less than a week, humanity has accomplished what 3,000 years of negotiations failed to achieve, Martinez continued. The Kythera problem has been solved. Ambassador Kellyan struggled to process what she was seeing. How is this possible? Your methods violated every principle of galactic law. Did they? Martinez asked. We acted in self-defense against unprovoked aggression. We used only the minimum force necessary to achieve our objectives. We offered defeated enemies a path to peaceful coexistence. But the tactics were effective, Martinez finished. Counselor Kellyan, humanity respects the Council's commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts. But we've learned that peace sometimes requires the credible threat of force to maintain. Director Voss leaned forward. What does this mean for humanity's relationship with the Council? Martinez smiled. It means we're ready to take our place as a full member of galactic civilization. We bring new perspectives, new capabilities, and new solutions to old problems. And if other species object to your methods, then they're welcome to try alternative approaches, Martinez replied calmly. But they should remember that humanity is no longer hiding behind diplomatic immunity. We've proven that we can defend ourselves and our interests. As the council session concluded, Ambassador Kellyan realized that everything had changed. For 3 millennia, galactic civilization had operated under the assumption that all problems could be solved through patience, negotiation, and gradual compromise. Humanity had just demonstrated that sometimes the best solution was direct action backed by overwhelming competence. The galaxy would never be the same. In the years that followed, other predator species would test human resolve. Pirates, raiders, and slavers would probe human territory, looking for weaknesses to exploit. They would find none. Captain Shun and others like her had taught the galaxy a simple lesson. Humanity was not prey. They were apex predators from a death world who had learned to cooperate instead of competing. They were capable of both incredible violence and incredible restraint. Most importantly, they were willing to use both qualities in defense of the innocent. The galaxy had trembled when humanity emerged from the shadows. It would continue to tremble whenever injustice threatened the peace that humans had fought to establish. And, in the darkness between stars, other predators would learn to fear the sound of human footsteps approaching from the void.